in the space and
Yeah.
people you go to and their opinion weighs heavier. And like you two guys are people for that. And I have like a roster of 10 people and you guys make up, you're on my starting 11 if it were soccer. And this guy said,
You're my top
yeah,
9 if
this
this is MySpace.
this guy said years ago, he said, you want to download this app and I'm going to show it as it looks. You can see all my other apps I know here, but it's that one on the
CoinStats.
top. No. It's called Crypto Pro.
Huh.
And I'll show you what the UX looks like on the inside, but it's really comfortable and it's really nice. And it
Oh.
allows you to put in all your trades. And maybe on another episode where I'm not putting my phone to the to the camera, you guys could see it and I could actually just share it through my phone if I open up Restream on my phone, and then you could just see my actual screen. But I found it to be really great because when you have a new trade, you get to put it in, you get to put in, for me, the US dollar amount that I bought it at, how much I bought, how much I paid in fees. It tracks the date. You can also set up alerts if you're just watching something. So if I'm looking at a coin, I'll do that. But Grant, were you saying you use CoinStats?
I use CoinStats. Pros and cons on that though. So like Cardano's tough to track because of the security layer of Cardano.
Okay.
With Yoroi, basically it creates a new account. Technically there's like pseudo accounts, and then it creates a new account for like every time you move money. It's like a single use account number. And so like when you set up CoinStats, and you guys have heard me say like Cardano makes up the lion's share, I say lion's share, like 40% of my portfolio. And so like if I do a transaction, that account address is now null and void. I have to go add it again. So that's annoying about CoinStats.
Okay.
And then the other thing is when you connect it, it doesn't show you your original buys, so you don't actually know your dollar cost average. But the only reason I brought that up was I've been getting these crazy notifications. I don't know if you guys do you guys get crypto notifications anywhere?
I
Yeah,
do.
I
I
use
do through
Delta.
Crypto Pro. Sorry, Joe. What'd you
Okay,
say?
Crypto Pro. And what'd you say, Jay?
I use Delta. It sounds like exactly like the same thing, like you guys describing.
Pretty much. I mean, they're all pretty much the same, and each of them are competing to build community in their own discords now and stuff. But I've been getting tons of notifications, like in the last weekend, of like Algorand popping 40%, coming down, DAO Maker popping 40%, like all through like Sunday. What do you guys know anything about that? Like, why have these been popping off like that this weekend? Is there anything going on? What's this
So,
TornadoCash? Does it have anything to do with that?
so I,
Well,
I have my ideas on this. Jay, do you want to take a stab at why things are popping?
I mean, a bunch of things happened recently, right? Like, I know we said we weren't going to talk politics, but this one, in my mind, is kind of
No,
like
as long as it
political.
relates to crypto, as long as
Okay,
it relates to the market movement.
I'm going to talk
so
about Mormonism in a second.
Ch- here we go. China, Russia reserve currency.
Oh,
Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan, and recently BlackRock started letting their investors trade crypto with Coinbase. So that kind of sounds like people are hedging against the dollar. I'm thinking like all of that stuff come together.
hedging
Blowing up right
against
now.
the dollar. So we're going into this at minimum an economic war with China next level and Russia. They've got the reserve currency, and you're saying BlackRock is letting its people trade through Coinbase?
Coinbase Prime. I had never even heard of Coinbase Prime. Apparently, it's something that they have. But yeah,
Coinbase
Yeah, it's
Prime
like an
is
institutional level.
exactly. It's the institutional grade. You got to have a certain amount of zeros to play in that pond.
Yeah.
And I think the thing with BlackRock, and this guy posted it today, and I responded, was just crazy because when you look at BlackRock, they have $10 trillion in assets under management. So if they were a country, they're right behind the US and China, which is absolutely freakish when you think about, right? That there's this entity that has that much economic energy. And so if they take a 1% allocation into Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
1% of 10 trillion is $100 billion. Overnight, if they were to put that into Bitcoin, it would see Bitcoin's price appreciate 22%. if Bitcoin is where it is today at $23,000. So
Huh.
this is where these conversations get really crazy for me and on my soul, which is a maxi, where you're like, people are like, oh, it's crazy. It's not going to go to $1 million. I'm like, oh, really?
What's the
How
underlying
many?
value basis?
Yeah, come on, man. It's not based on anything.
So I'm like, okay, great,
What?
whatever. And actually, I posted this, and my cousin, I don't know if he's watching this. If he is, he's gonna like. He
Blow a
said,
gasket.
yeah, because my point was like this. What Bitcoin getting to 70,000 was done where there are a lot more skeptics than adopters.
Yes.
What happens when there's more adopters than skeptics? And my cousin said, still a skeptic with like the crying LOL face. And I commented, I love the skeptics because they
Yeah.
keep the price down. They keep an undervalued asset out there
Oh,
for
interesting.
for DCAing and acquiring.
That's interesting. You had this guy post on your LinkedIn, and he asked that question: "What's the value basis?" And I got thinking about it, and I know what they're asking. I mean, the value-based investors, right? Like the Warren Buffetts, and they're looking at cryptos and trying to apply it to cryptos. But I think what Web3 or what cryptocurrencies have been doing as asset classes, not as software, not as tech, but as an asset class, it's been revealed, I think, like transparently, how absolutely zero valuation there is in most economic activity, how it really is emotional and belief based. Because I don't know if you saw my response, Jarrett, to the gentleman, but it was like, well, what is the value basis? Well, honestly, nothing at first. Adoption over time creates confidence and full faith. That's why they call it full faith in backed US dollar. I said, but then Grayscale holds 15 billion of Bitcoin, and its basis of evaluation of a company triangulates that the basis value of Bitcoin is what it is because the people investing in Grayscale at $15 or $16 a share believe that it's worth something. And that's and that one stair-step level of disconnect between their holdings and then they're paying them to hold their holdings, like that is its valuation. I mean, well, Grant, something isn't defined by itself, and it's like, actually, that's
circular.
what like all finance is. What'd you say,
So-
Jay?
I was gonna say it sounds circular. Yeah.
It is. Go ahead, Jarrett.
Yeah, so I haven't responded to him because I think there's a lot of different ways to go from it. There's like okay, why do you put value in the US dollar? If you straight up ask someone that, like when they come to me and they say, why is Bitcoin valuable? And I say, why is the US dollar valuable? They'll probably go into the fact that they can use that to go buy food, to buy gas, to pay their rent, to pay their mortgage. And the real answer as to why Bitcoin is so valuable right now, the one that I like really try to push on people, is that you're buying into a network. You're buying into the most powerful computer network on the planet. And it takes a certain amount of energy currently. And we know how much it costs. I think, it's around $18,000 to $20,000 or something like that to create a Bitcoin right now, more or less. And so that's kind of what you're buying. To get each Bitcoin, you're paying the network for its safety and security. And that's what you're getting.
Yeah.
And when people are like, okay, why are things valuable? Because the thing that's easily valuable for many people on the planet is real estate. And it's like, okay, you buy a house. When you buy a house, what are you buying? You're buying the materials, the labor, and then all the other third parties like real estate agents, lenders, and everyone else who's going to get their little, bite of the pie. But that's really what you're buying. And as those materials increase and labor increases, the amount of a house will go up. Now, obviously, there are things that are outside of this, which is demand, right? If the demand outweighs the supply, then the price is going to go up. But with Bitcoin, you're essentially right now, like the proof of work is really what you're buying. You're buying into the largest computer network, the largest decentralized computer network on the planet. And you're saying, I just want to hold an asset that's part of that on that network. That to me is what you're buying. And I know that Davian's left a comment, and we can get to that in a second.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to come back to this because this is current and I do want to know more about it. But when, I've heard this argument said about, and Norman jumped in, loving the conversation. Can't wait to hear what you guys think about TornadoCash. Okay, we're going to have to talk about TornadoCash if we know anything about it, or if y'all do. maybe Nick knows about it, TornadoCash. But the thing, I've heard this phrase before that, when you buy into Bitcoin, you buy into the largest computer network. When Google, I don't know if you guys remember this, but like back in the early days of Google. Google launched its browser. And then you could download this little client onto your desktop. And anytime you weren't using your desktop, it was actually using unused disk drive space for computations. And this is where it started its big data. Basically, it was the world's largest distributed computer at the time. And it was doing high level data processing, not just searches, but all kinds of stuff. And then you could buy that stock. And it was basically, there was a value model. What is the value model when people say the Bitcoin largest distributed computer network? Aside from it computing its own proof of work algorithm, so what? Like I mean, I value Bitcoin, and in our time together, I'm valuing it more and more and more. But this particular argument, I'm curious about. Like, so what about the largest distributed computer network? Does it have value other than itself?
Does it have value other than itself?
Which is good enough for me in general, but I just didn't know if there was hidden uses of the Bitcoin computer network.
I think it comes about when you start connecting it to other things. The distribution will matter for things like IoT. You know, like when you start getting far
Okay.
outside of cities, and you want to be able to do transactions for, I don't know, sending Wi-Fi, sending power, or just receiving data. It
Interesting.
makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah, that's curious to me. Huh. Real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, for me, I think there's two things. One, I think it's cool to hold an asset on the biggest decentralized monetary digital network. I think that that's really cool. And in a globalized world, and for me as someone who travels a lot, like I'm really excited that I own that digital asset. You know, there's only 21 million houses, right? Do you own
Yeah.
one? Do you own a piece? Do you own a room? You own a floor? Maybe you own a tile in the bathroom. Whatever it
Yeah.
is, just try to own something. And then the other one is just the solving of the broken money system. Those two
Yeah.
are paramount because we don't have
Yeah.
a hard money system. If we can just create fiat, it doesn't matter. Like the Biden just signed a bill, or he's going to sign it by the end of the week, and it's called the Inflation Reduction Act. And it's supposed to stop inflation, but yet he's going to pump $750 billion into the system. $750 billion in 2008 was 700 billion, I think, was the amount that bailed out the banks in the initial package. So in 14 years time, we're now passing bills that seem like, whatever, $750 billion. 2008 was like, this is going to save the world. So you can talk about how inflated the fiat economy is by like, this is going to happen, and 9 out of 10 people you ask on the street aren't even going to know that it's happening. So for me, there are those two things. And the dying of fiat, it's like, that's why you want to hold Bitcoin. But as far as Bitcoin's network and like its overall inherent value, I think Jay's totally right. When you tie it into IoT, and there are going to be people that are going to use that network to tie in things, and we haven't even started to like see what the future is. I think the Lightning Network is allowing it to kind of be something more maybe what Satoshi had outlined, which is like a payments network among people. But even that, the Lightning Network, while it solves some problems, I think for other people it creates different ones. But why don't we move on and talk about TornadoCash, because that is something that I think is at the forefront of the internet right now. And I also want to shout out that Nick Widmer will be a guest today. He's going to come in a little bit later. And so everyone stay tuned to that. But TornadoCash, the thing I want to talk about with TornadoCash, I'll just, if it's okay, I'll read a little background here. It says,
sure.
TornadoCash has been a key tool used by criminals to launder stolen funds, including the North Korean hacker tied to the 625 million Ronin bridge attack earlier this year. And the reason I found out about TornadoCash was, AKA the internet, we essentially communicate in memes. It was this, and I'm once again putting my screen up to the thing. Someone is trolling celebs by sending ETH from TornadoCash. So basically, today the Office of Foreign Asset Control said, you cannot mess with TornadoCash. And so somebody is out there, and it said it impacted wallets, including those controlled by Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong, a billionaire.
What?
TV host Jimmy Fallon, clothing brand Puma, and a wallet set up for donations to Ukraine, according to Etherscan. Prominent crypto figures like Beeple and more mainstream celebrities like Dave Chappelle are also receiving the ETH. So by receiving this, it's putting their wallets under like an issue.
Risk.
It's putting them in like some hot water just
they
by
can
being
get
able
frozen.
to send
They
it.
can't move the rest of their assets into their American accounts.
Yeah. And so it's like,
that's evil.
Yeah, because crypto's so everything's so tied together and so interconnected. One
Yeah.
little thing can have a crazy ripple effect. And so does one of you want to look at Davian's comment and build off that?
Yeah, here, let me, I have it right here. He says, which caused GitHub suspensions and the blacklisting of wallets holding more than 437 million. So he's basically saying giving more detail to what you were talking about. And that is a troll. I mean, that's a huge trolling because if people's assets are freezing. So this is interesting. This brings us, as always, back to regulation. Like, should this stuff not be is this sort of thing? I mean, this is humorous because celebs are getting punked, and that's kind of humorous. But, donations to Ukraine, however, are getting frozen out. So do we want there to be a mechanism, a law-based mechanism, or some authority that can step in and go, oh, let's filter this out. Okay, these guys know this, yes, and let's fix this. Like, do you want more centralized authority to be able to regulate some of this?
Well, I mean,
Jay?
do they even? Does it even matter if they try to regulate it? Like the only people that it affects are the 300 million people who live in the United States. Like everybody else can just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna just continue doing this. I'm not going to the US and I don't use a bank account, so this doesn't affect me in the slightest bit. And it's kind of weird to me that we all knew what was happening with TornadoCash, and then this isn't the only one.
Did we? I've never even heard of it till today.
Oh, you've never heard of it?
No.
Oh yeah,
No.
it's been happening for a while. Yeah, like Jarrett read, North Korea had been using it for a while, and lots of other people who are trying to figure out, how do I take this Bitcoin or whatever crypto that I got and figure out what I can do with it. A lot of times, I think they
It's
just
a Tumblr, right?
like
It's
how it works is everybody puts in the same amount of crypto. I think usually it's ETH. You put in the same amount of ETH, and it all gets mixed together, and then you get out that ETH. And so it's impossible to tell, whose ETH you have at the end.
Yeah. Nefarious means, or if it was just, yeah. What, Jarrett?
No, I'm just giggling. And I love Jay's point because I think that the US is only 5% of the world population. And I think crypto is being adopted in other countries. And, I think I speak fairly broadly about Latin America a lot, but I think in other countries or any place in the world where you're seeing your currency be devalued or you're tied to the dollar and you are an importer or net exporter and you're just kind of tied to the dollar, you're going to adopt crypto, and you might want to use TornadoCash for whatever different reason. Like, I don't know. And for me, the regulating this, like Jay says, is so hard because really all you're going to do is say, if you do it, like stateside, if we're just focusing on state, if you do it, you could get in trouble. But like, you could open up a MetaMask and you could do like different things. We all know how you could like wash through, and unless someone's looking through the Etherscan and going to follow you down a rabbit hole, which is also not that difficult to do if you know what you're looking for. Yeah. This is kind of like the way of it. So I don't know.
So is this just like yet another, this is just the public learning the bad neighborhoods of the internet again, like, I mean, is that pretty much like, oh crap, user error, proceed at your own risk, I mean, is it just another area where if you want decentralization, you just got to learn the bad? You guys remember when someone in the early internet owned whitehouse.com?
No.
What
you're about to tell us. Story time with Grant.
You could be in the early days, White House was setting up, I mean, everyone didn't even have websites and they were just setting up websites. And then in school, it was listed, because it wasn't even, you didn't even have search at the time. You just had list servers like Yahoo and Netscape. And so these things would get listed, and you'd have government websites and it would be like irs.com. And we didn't even have .gov yet, right? Mm-hmm. Someone bought whitehouse.com and it was a porn site.
Oh my gosh.
And so teachers after teachers were going, oh, wow, look what we found. We could go visit information about the White House through the interwebs.
Excellent.
But I mean, chaos.
It was so chaos. Early. It was so early. I'm glad it was early. Like in 4K, and this kid like Stevie, 12-year-old Stevie was like, oh my God.
And it would like slowly render a booty, and then like it's like, what is going on? Unplug it. But my point is though, back then you learn, back then you learn the bad neighborhoods of the web. And so is this one of these things where you just don't use tumblers? Have you guys ever used a tumbler like this, or a pool, or whatever they call
Jay,
it?
have you?
I've never used it. No, never had a reason to.
I've never had a reason to, other than when we get a bunch of money for Not Crypto Bros and we have to launder it to buy some, like, I don't know, some high rise in Qatar or something, Qatar. I want to say it is about that time. And Nick Widmer,
Yeah.
if you're watching, if you wanna hop on in,
What
feel
does
free
Nick
to jump
know?
in.
Yeah,
does
text
Nick-
him, see if he has any challenges with the
He's
tech
actually
there.
been texting me. He's like, I don't really know much about TornadoCash, but I think that I wonder, and I don't know this, but I wonder if TornadoCash is used more outside of the United States, but I'm not sure. I
Maybe.
I just have no idea.
I've known of this service. I just didn't know of this one in particular.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and this might be an interesting time with NFTs. Like, I just saw that yet another high-profile Bored Ape was stolen from some CEO and sold back to him for like 130K. We saw this with Seth Green. How are these NFTs being brought back into people's accounts, like, and still remain anonymous? Hello, Nick.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hey.
What's up, Nick?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Cool.
Great mic.
Good,
Nick, we're
good to see
on
ya.
the topic of NFTs, and a brief intro on Nick. Nick has been a guest on Jay's podcast, the Digital Leaders podcast, as well as my podcast, More Than Blockchain. He is a writer, and at the end, we'll let him shout out his blog because you should definitely read it. He just did a very moving piece
But the ALS,
about
I just saw that.
about a former football player with ALS, which I mean, I think it's done the rounds of the internet, which has been great because you and your brother really worked hard on that. And
Thank you.
Grant had just asked about NFTs. Grant, you want to rephrase, say the question?
Well, we
again?
were
'Cause I thought it
talking
was
about TornadoCash.
Well, Grant
and
should know that
stories.
I remember WhiteHouse.com as well. I think I
Do you really?
messed that up. Yeah.
See, I'm not full of shit, dude. Nick knows.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Well,
remember.
that's because Nick was one of those kids in like the 5th grade, and they like opened it up, and Nick was like, "Oh my god!" and he like saw the booty rendering.
It is crazy to think how far like we've come from that in just, what was that, 25 years, 20 years?
Oh yeah. Think of
Yeah.
how entitled we are now. We're like,
Yeah.
dadgum, I don't want centralization. Back then, we're like, can I please just plug in my Ethernet cable? You know.
Yeah. On the one desktop computer in your parents' house.
Yeah, it's my turn. Yeah, you had turns.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Totally.
we had turns. We had a sign-up sheet.
Oh yeah, a sign-up sheet. When your parents would pick up the phone and it would cut the internet.
Mhm.
I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember this.
Oh my god,
I remember that.
It's like you talk to your little girlfriend on the phone and your parents, Mom, hang up. But then you were on the internet and you're like, I'm looking at important things. So the question was like these, I call them tumblers. Am I using the right term for TornadoCash? Are they called tumblers? What are they called?
I think
I
that's
think
the
I have no
name.
idea.
I think it makes sense. Scramblers, maybe.
Scramblers. Like we should just call them laundry pools. I mean, they're just
Seriously.
like, so like when people, getting onto the topic of NFTs, when people steal an NFT, and then like there's this negotiating process to reclaim the NFT. Like, how do they do that? Not like truly anonymously. Like functionally. Like, can we talk to a hacker? Does anyone know? Do they use these Tumblr pools and like put this much money here? Like how does that work?
I don't know.
I'm
It's
a
got to be like a middleman, right? Somebody who does the talking.
Oh, dude, you could start a whole service for that. Like, I just won't ask questions. Just send me the money and I'll take care of it for a fee.
Nick, do you have any
think,
insight on that?
I don't. I imagine when you're starting to deal with like assets that are that high in value, you're
Yeah.
using a middleman or like a bridge service. Like, I think MoonPay might be one of them where they deal. They like basically help celebrities and high net worth individuals buy these assets, and I'm pretty sure they hold them for them, like in a custodial way.
Like an
But I think like
escrow
in
or
like
something.
Seth Green got his
Yeah.
Bored Ape stolen, I think, a
Yeah.
few months ago, which was kind of hilarious. But but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I it's a good question, like where the negotiation comes in. I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
because we know that the FBI can track like for real hacks. Like we've seen them reclaim funds and stuff. And I just wonder, like, where does all that come into play when it's like my $200,000 Bored Ape? You know, I was just curious.
Yeah, I also wonder how it works if, say I have my MetaMask and I have my Bored Ape, and on MetaMask you can have different like Ethereum wallets. Like I actually don't even know the max amount, but I have like 2 or 3. And so I
Yeah.
have it on my third one, and that's where I keep my Bored Ape. And Jay steals it. And Jay is in another part of the world. Like what jurisdiction is gonna, like, Jay's in Spain.
Yeah.
Is Interpol gonna like kick his door down and be like, give it back, give him back the monkey? Like, I just don't know how that works. And I think that
Give him
like,
back the monkey.
yeah, like I just think our government has better things to do. And so I think it goes back to a conversation we had on our last episode, which is just kind of like, you have to really take care of your own stuff, because
Yeah.
if it goes awry and you send Bitcoin to the wrong address, or you get your wallet drained, like many people I know have, I think it's really, really tough to figure that out. Or I guess what I'm saying is be able to bring some kind of legal action or judicial
Yeah.
action against them.
Yeah. That's wild. So, I mean, this raises a great point, or an interesting point anyway. I don't know if it's a great point. Nick held a doodle, right? And I got to hear this. So, like, I know this is not interview style, but I've got to hear why he got rid of the doodle, of course. But on this topic for a moment, do you own other, like, A-list
Blue chip
NFTs like that?
NFTs, yeah.
I don't. I sold most of my NFTs in March. I had the
Good on you.
Doodle, which I had the Doodle. Well, actually, sorry, not March. I sold it in April when things started to get a little shaky. I had a Cryptode, which went up really high at one point. I think it went to like 18 ETH. But then it kind of leveled out at around 2. So I didn't buy in when it was that high. And it's funny because Jarrett and Jay, I think I talked to you guys in December, right? So we're talking like, how long now? 8 months, right? 8, 9 months.
Wow.
Yeah, I think we recorded in, I'll look it up, but I feel like it was November.
Yeah. I think you might be right. So I mean, man, like what a crazy, how quickly things have changed, and how much the space has evolved, and bear market
Gone
and all that
quiet.
jazz. Yeah, right. I think so. What happened with me? So I bought my Doodle, and I remember I was at NFT NY. I think I told this story in your podcast too. I was at NFT NYC in October, and I remember everyone was talking about this project called Doodles, and they were like, "You got to get in, you got to get in." And this was when it was, I think the floor was like hovering around 0.8 ETH. So I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm going to buy one of these things. And sure enough, it took off. And I think what happened to me psychologically, it's a weird thing how your brain works and tricks yourself in a lot of ways. I mean, all of a sudden you're holding an asset. I think Doodles was worth, I think it went to 28 ETH, the floor at its high mark. So all of a sudden you're looking at that in dollars, and you have like an $80,000 asset, right? I mean, and you think about just like how much value that is. And for me at least, I just remember thinking like, I think I got to get out of this because there started to be some negative sentiment. This was like right in the beginning of like when the recession started kind of picking up, and it's all, I mean, I think one of my biggest critiques, and I've kind of changed my tune a little bit where I'm not cynical, but I'm much more critical of the space. And the reason why, especially the NFT space, and if we're just talking about like art or PFP projects, like the Doodles and the V Friends and Cryptodes, like I have a funny feeling we're going to look back and see these as like the MySpace iteration of this whole thing, with the exception to like CryptoPunks, and I think Bored Apes will hold up, but maybe a few others. But I think what happens is you just start thinking about like, okay, if this was like a stock I owned or any other asset, like what is it doing outside of speculation and hype? And what I mean by that is like Doodles, they make some big announcements. Like I think it was 2 months ago or so, they hired like they made a big announcement that Pharrell was going to be their chief, I think brand or culture officer. So like, what the fuck does that mean? You know, like in a like that's cool and it makes headlines and like Billboard will write an article about it, but outside of like speculation, it's like where's the value coming from there? Because in my experience, it's mostly been, and again, I bought in at 0.8. So like, I think if someone bought in at 10 ETH, they're like, they tend to believe the hype a little more. And there's definitely an element of greed that sets in. We were like, well, this is going to be the next Bored Ape. This is going to go to, 90 ETH, and then maybe I'll sell it when it hits $150,000. And it just gets a little crazy, especially if you have debt or loans, just other things in life that are like actually made of atoms and concrete that you could use this money for.
So Thomas says Vincent Paddy's not enough. That's pretty. I don't know if you see that in the chat.
I mean, I can't tell if that's sarcastic or not.
I don't know. I mean, because I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, Thomas, what kind of $80,000 parties you going to, my guy?
Yeah, no. I mean,
it might have been at some point, right? Like that might have been enough. Like, I'm really curious about the psychology of this. So to your point, because you have held, of the four of us, you have held the highest profile NFT, I think. Mm-hmm. I've never even asked the guys, like, have you guys ever held an A-list NFT or something that went mooned?
I have Journey Crypto, which is at one point it had the highest for a 10,000 project. It had the highest amount of owners. So it meant that owners didn't have like 12 and 13. It had the most amount of people for a 10,000 project. And that was like a bragging point because it was like a lot more people at the party, if you will, if we're talking about Tomas's comment. But it, the max I think it got up to was like 6 or 7 ETH.
Yeah. What I think about it, did you guys watch the documentary about Theranos?
Oh yeah.
That documentary. So the events and parties, like I was jelly, right? Of missing Bored Apes, missing CryptoPunks. And when I say missing, like I got the invite of go buy these because everyone had known that I've been in Bitcoin since 2011. And like they're like, you got to get into NFTs. I'm like, what's going on? And I didn't get the art. I didn't get it. So are events and parties not enough? That's like asking, hi, I'm at Theranos. Are the parties outside with the bouncy house not enough for a company that does something versus a company that does nothing? And now if a company came along and said, no, we're an event company. We're Red Rocks in Denver and parties and events are what we do. Then it's like, okay, but like, Nick, you sound like you came in not, I don't mean this wrong, but you sound like you have like a natively skeptic view of kind of what, or at least intellectual view of what's going on with something like a stock versus an NFT. I bought at 0.8. But this was the question that Tomas's statement I wanted to ask. When you saw Doodle for 0.8, you mentioned greed might have kicked in or maybe FOMO, but did you ever go in thinking, I'm a hodler on this thing?
For a while, yes, but I think again, I went in on it 0.8, which wasn't a crazy like for me at the time, it wasn't a crazy investment with like, back in the fall, like everyone knew about every mint. This was like kind of before white lists, and it was like being at a roulette table. It was like being at a roulette table, like seeing just how crazy these would mint out, and then the next day it would 4 or 5x, and then people would be able to, people were making thousands and thousands of dollars, and they still are. And I should preface all this by saying, I'm still rooting for this space, and I think I want like a project like Doodles to do well, because I think the decentralized brand building components of it are really fascinating, interesting. But as far as like the innovation goes, like I think everyone likes to talk about utility, and like right now for me, at least for Doodles, and I'm sure there's Doodles holders, if they listen to this, that like know more than me or have more optimistic outlooks for the roadmap. But like the utility is like an example of the utility is you have token gated access to buy limited edition merch.
Yes.
Right. So like that's the utility.
The Bored Ape hoodies or whatever.
So I think the logic starts falling apart from like an investing and speculative standpoint, where it's like, okay, well, I have basically a Mercedes-Benz in my MetaMask wallet, and I guess they throw good parties, right? Like, and so for me, when the climate started getting rocky, when the climate started getting rocky, I just didn't want to be left holding the bag with nothing out of it. Now, for me, the way I looked at it, because these guys know too, like I believe in the space, I work in it. I think the innovation is like really cool and interesting.
Yes.
I was like, I'd feel safer having the Ethereum, right,
Yes.
than one Doodle that and Doodles could very well like take off and sustain. And I actually think there's something to be said for how well a lot of these NFTs have held up during the bear market. Like it's kind of amazing when you think about how like volatile it's been and just sentiment, and yet they're holding pretty strong. Like even Doodles, I think is at I think it's hovering around like a 10 ETH floor, which is still pretty damn good. But I think like the uncertainty at some point, you're like, I can't, and it's like ultimately why you respect people that can hold for better or worse.
You gotta respect it, dude.
Yeah.
Like, what do they see?
Then
Because
again, you guys,
we're looking at a
can,
property that 80K is a deposit on a property that I know I could
I mean,
clear
I'm looking at New York City, paying rent in New York City, and it's like, well, I could, cover this for 2 years, but I guess I like so you just start playing these games in your head, and it depends where you're at in life, exactly. I guess. But good for everyone who's still holding. And then you also think about something like Bitcoin, where you guys are probably better versed in Bitcoin than I am, but you're like, okay, well, I could flip this for 1.5 Bitcoin. Like, so you start, that's where you start going ultimately, like what's going to be the more anti-fragile asset or cryptocurrency to hold. And I think we're still figuring that out. Right. But I think ETH's going to rally,
Well, and I think hindsight's 2020 also, right? This was, this phrase, we are early, I really think we need to get off that a little bit, because I think the phase of we are early has happened and we're still early-ish, right? Like, but this point Tomas makes is when you said Bored Apes and CryptoPunks aren't going to be the MySpace, I agree. CryptoPunks has Tiffany and company, and Bored Apes has their game. The game didn't exist. Other deeds didn't exist when we were all speculating on this, right? So you're right. Like maybe Doodles does events and parties and that's enough. But I think we buy into those frills, just like Theranos' bounty house outside, as a potential sign that our bet is going to pay off in some sort of real asset soon. But But when I hear this sort of lingo, that's no different than the hype I heard in my 20s about that one MLM or this. And so I guess my better nature then has to kick in and go, I haven't built the wealth I've built by buying into everything, but by selling things, Go ahead, Jay.
I'd love to ask Tomas, like, does he not think that the jewelry, Tiffany and the game are frills as well? I mean, like how many rappers have had expensive jewelry and they're gone? Like the jewelry doesn't really mean anything. Like how many video games have come and gone? Like is that really staying power?
I think it's more staying power than just the parties. Like if I watched a gradient, and this you posed this question to Tomas, so I'd love to hear him. But in Tomas's defense, like I can imagine the psychology of a 20-something who just got done with GameStop and Wall Street bets, and is like, I got this cash, what the F? And then someone comes along and says, I've got an Airbnb that we bought with the treasury of Bored Apes, and we're throwing a party, and more to come, roadmap, and them going, okay. But they're the first in the scene to do it.
Okay.
I'd say a game is an income model. A game could be an income model. I don't know about jewelry necessarily. What do you got?
Well, I think there's also like a distinction between like there's clearly like luxury NFTs emerging, right? And I read a really interesting article the other day about, and I heard one podcast I listened to, they were having this discussion about LVMH, right? So the national luxury conglomerate. And they define luxury for their brands as, I think I wrote it down so I could bring this point up. Like there's two components. There's like a timelessness component. So it has 1 foot in the past and then 1 foot at, I think they phrase it as like the utmost forefront of modernity. So like these luxury brands like a Dior or a Louis Vuitton or a Givenchy, like they're staying in the past. They're also like super interested. Like, what's the next like scarce thing we're able to brand and own and provide scarcity around? And you think about Birkin bags. I think there's like a million Birkin bags, maybe even more, maybe 10 million. And those are, I mean, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of Birkin bags or have ever come across one of those things, but like I think
Jared's smiling. He knows what it is.
Do you know what it is, Jared? It's they retail at like,
show us yours, Jarrett.
I think like 10 or 15 grand.
Yeah, I have mine upstairs, climate controlled environment. Thanks, Grant.
Yeah, sure.
Humidor.
But I was talking about this with, I'm not sure if I was talking about this with Victor, but I just think the metaverse is really going to take this idea of brand and just blow it up, because you have your bag, you have your Birkin bag, and in 15 or 20 years where you're walking around with your avatar, that's where you're going to want to have your flex. And the marginal cost to create a Birkin bag right now, right? There are some cogs, there's, cost of goods sold, but in the future, when you can just mint something, these brands that have been building in the physical world, when all of a sudden they just want to go into the digital world, I just think it's going to be absolutely incredible. And Davian has a comment here, but before I get to Davian's comment, if it's okay, I want to ask each of you, and I want you guys to speak on this. This was something I heard the other day on Instagram. It was some guy who was just walking around like asking people questions, as one does to create content on Instagram. But I thought it was a very fascinating question, because I answered it differently from most of my friends. And the question was this, and think about it. Maybe you can talk about your reasoning, and I'll share where I would go. But it was, if you could, would you rather be able to meet Jay-Z, probably like have a dinner with him, or get $500,000? Because, and I think that this speaks to the idea behind Doodles and the idea behind many NFTs, which is access. And it depends how much you put value in meeting like celebs versus like money in your pocket. So if any of you guys want to, answer this, I'd be very interested, because I found the question to be fascinating, because I'll share how I answer, but my friends, all of them were like, oh, 500K, easy. And I'm like, dude, I've been listening to Jay-Z since mid-90s. Jay-Z? Yeah. I go with Jay-Z.
Wow.
Because I could
get
have
out of here.
No, because I could have 500K. That doesn't mean I get to meet Jay-Z. Right? Right. Like my Ethereum will be worth that much eventually, as long as Kathy Wood's right. But that doesn't mean I get to meet Jay-Z, Hove. That's not how that works. So I would much rather sit with him. And he's like, dude, why do you want to sit with me over 500? I would love to have that conversation with him. I just want to, because money doesn't buy access. It's beyond that. And I think NFTs tap into that. So I don't know if any of you guys want to speak on that, or where you would go, or say how crazy. Obviously, Victor's having a heart attack because the dude wants to put leverage on his 500K that Bitcoin's going to 100
told us on the
by
last
Friday.
Show to our audience, and we forgot to say not financial advice on the last show. He's like,
yeah,
I'd borrow everything.
Seriously.
So do you guys, I don't know if you want to speak on that, but that's what that's what was going on in my head when I was hearing the conversation where Nick was, talking about the money versus the access. And I just thought Tomas's question was so great. Like, are events and parties not enough?
Yeah. I mean it's because I saw Davian's comment as well, which I think I could get at here. I think when you start understanding the like luxury fashion space and sector, I saw on Hypebeast the other day, like a pair of Balenciaga like shower slippers. They were just like black rubber slippers going for like $1,500.
Yeah.
Like, and they said Balenciaga on them. And I obviously it's because they have I think Kanye is one of their creative directors, and it's about that there's only 1,000 of those released, or however much there is. So this is now, I think, these high value scarce assets in the metaverse or NFTs are just the evolution of that. But to answer Davian, I might be pronouncing it wrong, so sorry if I am. I don't disagree with his take here. For anyone listening, he's saying that brands like Doodles are brought on Pharrell to basically help introduce their brand to a larger community, because they're probably preparing ways to resonate with audiences outside of the context of NFTs. So I agree with that. And I have no doubt. I mean, Doodles has like a crazy war chest of Ethereum that they can just throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. And eventually something might stick, but the trade-off you're making is like, again, like you have an $80,000 asset. Are you going to bet on this story that this kind of nebulous collection of cartoon characters will one day be able to generate more value than that across the board? And I think it ultimately is like, I wasn't willing to take that bet anymore,
Sure.
especially when the water got a little rocky in the space. So like, again, all the power to people who are doing it, but I just think it's not like, it's like, yeah, I hope they can, like, I guess they can make a show or merch or maybe make an album. Like, I don't know yet how it's going to resonate with like a broader consumer audience. Now the other side of that token is like, for crypto punks and Bored Apes, like the Tiffany's thing that I think someone just referenced. Like, are you guys aware of what just happened with that?
With the Tiffany's thing? No. I mean, I saw
So
the deal, but did something happen?
No, they just did this partnership basically, where they minted 250 Tiffany
Pendants,
crypto
right?
punk, pendants, that if you got one of these things, and they were for 30 ETH, so they were all basically 50 grand, they can make a customized Tiffany's jewelry pendant out of your crypto punk. And they sold out in like, I think like 5 or 10 seconds, or minted out in 5 or 10 seconds.
What?
So yeah, but then you think about it's because, again, like high net worth people and actors who already are spending $400,000 on an NFT, like, yeah, they want to like maintain that
You want
status,
the
and that
physical
exclusivity.
version of it. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, and it makes sense for the luxury brand, but that's where like you try to think about, okay, well, what's luxury here versus like consumer friendly? Because so I don't know, it's a tricky issue, and only time will tell.
So 500K or Jay-Z?
500K.
No question. Jay, what do you got?
I'm going for 500K. Like, I can take 100K and I don't know, probably have lunch with Grant Cardone or something. I feel like that's equally as good.
Okay. I want it to be known on the Not Crypto Brothers podcast, comparing Grant Cardone to one of the greatest artists and minds of human history. Jay, I'm worried about you on that one. But I want to shout out this idea too that we're talking about, that Davian's brought up, and I think Nick just did an amazing job on rounding out the value behind these things, and how these brands and the phygital, and we could talk about the word phygital, Grant's favorite word. Nike they put up something recently which was absolutely amazing, and I don't know, Grant, if you can share screen and we can get on OpenSea, but they had these sweatshirts. I don't know if you guys saw this. And the sweatshirts, they were super cool, and the sweatshirts had an AR version to it. Yeah, so when you put them on, you'd be able to see like these wings coming out. And they had the sale up for a certain amount of time, and you had to buy it within a certain amount of time. I don't know if there was a limited amount. I think there was a limited amount. Maybe it was like 20,000. But if you bought one, then they would basically mail you out this sweatshirt within the next week, which I thought was super cool as someone who had ran a clothing company in the past. And like, you know, while I may not be fashionable, I understand the world of fashion in some sense. And when you already know what sizes you want to order, that's freaking amazing. And so I really liked what Nike did. And I think we're going to see that a lot more. It's no surprise that it's going to start with brands that have that can, like Balenciaga can sell a $3 molded piece of plastic for $1,500 and just crush and just have loads of cash, that they're going to start to play with this. But eventually you're going to go into your local sporting goods store and you're going to buy your Champion sweatshirt. And it may come with a little AR thing where when you have it on and someone has their phone and they go to take a picture of you, and Instagram will have this thing, you're going to be able to see like this C over your head, like a halo for Champion. I mean, I'm just making things up at this point, but it doesn't surprise that it will start with the people who have bags of cash and can just say, yeah, you know, this little rope you put around your wrist is worth 3,000 because it says Balenciaga, but eventually it will trickle down. And in that process, I'm interested to see what other brands kind of grab onto it, because while I would pick the meeting with Jay-Z over the 500K, when Nick told me that he sold the Doodle, I was like, good on him. He took profit, because there are too many people in this space that FOMO in and then stay in too long and believe it too much. Like Nick said, he also got in at a pretty low entry point, but if you got in at 10, even if it's at 10 now, when you got in at 10, it was probably 4,500 for ETH. Now it's only 1,600. So you're down 66% if you sell, right? So there's some economics here that are kind of interesting. But I was actually really happy that Nick sold, because I think it's a cooler story to talk about how he sold than if he ends up getting wrecked. And I think a lot of people got wrecked in the NFT space. For everyone that you hear and you're on Instagram and you're like, oh, 16-year-old makes $3 million in 5 days, which every time I see it, I hate it, because I'm like, you're talking about the exception, not the rule, and you're creating this kind of casino-like thing. But anyways, I'm kind of on different tangents, but I wanted to ask Nick, and I know that this is not related to crypto. Right before we go, I wanted to ask Nick to speak about his article that he did on he did on his Substack, and because it's took you guys a while to do, and it's about one of the more prominent figures, if not the one of the top for me prominent figures in the ALS battle that humanity's been dealing with for decades at this point.
Oh, well, thanks for letting me chat about that, man. Yeah, I mean, it was nice to write a non-crypto related article. I think the competition for Web3 Substack writers it's very there's a lot of good ones out there. So it was nice to be like, I'm just going to write about something different. It was a little more human. And yeah, my brother Max and I, who he's edited all my pieces. This is my twin brother. We've always been huge fans of Steve Gleason. I'm not sure if you guys have seen have you seen, Jared, you said you saw the documentary from 6 years ago?
Yeah, I think I saw it. Was that okay? And please correct me, because I've been seeing many of these. Was that the 30 for 30? Was that an ESPN one, or is that
no? He's had a bunch of those like content snippets floating around over the years on ESPN.
Okay.
But basically, Steve's story is he was an NFL player, special teams, punt blocker, and kick return team for the Saints. Really scrappy, heart-filled player. He had a famous block. So like the game after Hurricane Katrina, he blocked this punt that ended up being super iconic for the city of New Orleans. Like they kind of symbolize like the revitalization of the city. And right after he retired, a year after he retired, he found out he had ALS. 6 weeks after he found out he had ALS, he found out his wife was pregnant. So just an amazing story about, within a year, this guy went from being like a fully healthy 33-year-old to only being able to move his eyes, which are the last internal sensory organ that doesn't get touched. So ALS, like your mind basically is fully untouched and preserved. And then your whole body, you lose your whole capability in your physical body and your physical autonomy. So nevertheless, like he's an amazing writer. He's an amazing advocate for ALS. Definitely recommend following this guy on Twitter. It'll make all the crypto BS seem a lot less important. So we reached out.
Drink it.
Yeah, big time. So we reached out to his team and said, hey, like we'd love to get a chance to interview Steve and write a story about him. He was up for the interview after we sent our questions, and what we thought was going to be like a quick article ended up being basically like a 6-month long process where we became friends with him. We chatted with him, pretty much daily through this app that he uses. And I think we really got a chance to tell his story and our perspective of it.
Wow.
So yeah, feel free to check it out. I appreciate you letting me plug that.
What for the viewers to kind of share a little bit more of a snippet into that, what was some of your personal takeaways, whether a principle or just something that moved you? There's like, I loved this aspect of this storytelling.
You're saying as far as like what I learned from the process
you as
of writing
an author,
about him. Yeah, I think what's so powerful about his story is that he's really like, and man, we really did a 180 here talking about Doodle's price fluctuation and Steve Gleason, but he's really taken his like I mean, it's like the most unfathomable level of like human suffering you could probably like think about. and he's taken it head on, and he's leaned into it, and he's learned, and he reads all the time. He's constantly exploring his mind and pushing his perspective. And there's a lot of wisdom there. Like, he's a happy guy, and he's content.
Really?
And he's a great father, a great husband, and he's generally pretty stoked about life still, more than most people. So I think for us, for my brother and I, it was just like this amazing insight we had into, and everyone like goes through tough times and hardship and varying levels of suffering. But like, he's just like this pretty amazing, like, real life symbol and reminder that like you can bear that and still be fired up about your life. And like, it teaches you a lot, and there's wisdom there on the other side of like ultimately fear. So yeah, it was a heavy thing to write about. So I appreciate you guys asking and sharing it, reading it.
Yeah, man. And where can people grab that? Like, where do people follow you? Give a shout out to that or any project. I guess this is a moment for shout outs real quick. Like,
Yeah.
where can people follow you?
Yeah, thanks. You can read it on my Substack, which is just nickwidmer.substack.com, or follow me on Twitter at NFWidmer is where I post most of my thinking. And yeah, right now I'm also working for, just to keep the plugs going, I'm working for a very cool Web3 brand consultancy based out of New York City called Rumford. So we're helping a lot of, I guess Web2 is probably not the right word, but a lot of like really interesting non-crypto brands like adapt and figure out the space. Rumford's did the Adidas into the metaverse, which dropped in December.
Okay.
They were the strategic partner there. So now we're helping brands like Netflix and Dior and Ralph Lauren, and I mean all these so many of these CMOs at these companies and national brands, like they're pushing their teams like, okay, we need innovative thinking.
Wow.
What's coming, and naturally a lot of that is in this space, in the Web3 space. So anyone who's listening, know that there's still a lot of work being done under the fold in this space, which is really cool and exciting.
Yeah, man. Like, that's real onboarding. Everyone talks about, hey, let's do onboarding. That's the real onboarding, man. Well, thanks for being on the show. We're going to wrap up our shout outs here in a second, and we'll make sure that we put those in the show notes. And thanks for your time, Nick. We really appreciate it, man.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm glad you guys are doing this. It's really cool, especially
super fun. We'll bring you back on soon.
Jane,
Take care.
Jarrett. Yeah. All right. Nice to meet you guys. Take care.
So, keeping in the spirit of wrapping up and shout outs, team, what do you got?
What do we got, Jay? Do you got anything special?
I was thinking about this week. I wanted to shout out Vitalik because I've been seeing like
your boy.
Your boy Vitalik.
Wait, your boy Vitalik, who you doubted, and then it doubled, and then it doubled.
He's definitely been evolving as a person, as an entrepreneur, and I think it's pretty interesting. So like recently he was talking about what anonymous Ethereum accounts. I don't know if you all saw that. So basically having it set up so that you can trade back and forth and not necessarily have to worry about being tracked by Etherscan. And I think that plus what I was seeing with his recent paper about soulbound tokens, just sort of shows that the level of complexity to this stuff has moved away from just like the technical, like what's technically possible, to what's actually useful and can move the culture and is necessary for society. So I just wanted to shout out Vitalik real quick.
Yeah, I dig that. What do you got, Jarrett?
No, I'm really happy Jay said that. My friend Jared, who I don't think will listen to this, but he's the biggest enigma of my life. Jared, if you're listening, he's just like a fantastic human being. And if you ever get in a conversation with him, you'll learn something, which is a beautiful thing. And I think that that's wonderful. And he sent me screenshots. He's with his wife and they happened to be in Seoul, Korea. And he went to go see Vitalik speak.
What?
And I'm like, okay, bro, nice flex on me. So that was really cool. I don't really have any other shout outs. I guess we'll be back next week, same time. And the one thing I will say, if you're listening to this, if you're on podcast or you're on YouTube or you're listening to this back on LinkedIn, if you can do us the huge favor, go to LinkedIn, find our show, Not Crypto Bros, and like it. We need to crack 150 likes before we can start to do live streaming through our page. And until then, we have to do it through one of our personal pages, which isn't a problem. But as Grant would like to say, there are some values to centralization. So we want to centralize people's attention to the Not Crypto Bros page. So if you're hearing this, please go like that page. Also follow us on Twitter and YouTube. And we're live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah. And just a quick thank you on the way out to Nick for being here. I feel like you guys told me, let's not make this an interview. But I'm telling you, like, I want to sit with that guy and be like, okay, here's a voice you don't normally hear. Usually crypto boys are like, to the moon. Or they're like, this is the worst thing ever. And Nick just seems even about, oh, here's all these opportunities. And he's still writing. What do you got, Jarrett?
Yeah, you should have him on your show. You should have him on
totally
your show. He's come on with Jay and myself, and I think next time I'm in New York, and Nick, if you're hearing this is a shout out at you because we need to do this. I want to get mics, and I want to sit with he and his brother, Max, who works for Blockworks. So they're both professionally in crypto and Web3. And so I just want to get mics, and we're going to do like a 2 or 3 hour extravaganza, talk about nothing, talk about everything. And I want to throw it up on More Than Blockchain. Those guys are really great. And I do think that they're exactly what we're trying to do with Not Crypto Bros, which is exactly what you're saying, Grant. Not have dudes that have like HODL t-shirts on and are just like, you know, I don't eat food, I eat Bitcoin. We want to have a variety of people that come on. And Nick is a fantastic writer. So we'll put this in the show notes, his Substack. But I read that Gleason piece and it was emotionally moving for me. So it was, everyone should read that. And Grant, I don't know if you've read it yet, but it's powerful. It's really powerful.
Not in its entirety. I started skimming and I was like, oh, I need to sit with a cup of coffee on this.
Yeah, you need to take some space. So
yeah, man. Well, thanks for your time, everybody. Check us out. Like Jarrett said, check us out. Not Crypto Bros on LinkedIn. Like, share, and invite a friend to like the show. And thanks so much, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.